The ships came on a Tuesday morning. Remembered this because she had been late for her history class, running across the university campus with her bag bouncing against her hip. She had looked up at the sound, expecting thunder, and instead saw the sky fill with metal. That was 2 years ago. Now Earth belonged to the Dominion. They were not cruel rulers, not exactly. They did not burn cities or murder populations. They simply made it clear that humanity was beneath them. Humans could work, could live, could even keep their governments and their little traditions, but they would never be equals. They were a conquered species, and conquered species had only one path to freedom, the arena of proving. Learned about the arena the same way everyone else did, through the mandatory broadcasts that played on every screen, every device, every surface that could project their messages onto. The arena was ancient, older than the Dominion itself. When a species was conquered, they could send one champion to fight. If that champion won, the species earned their place as equals. If they lost, they remained conquered for another 100 years. In 10,000 years of Dominion history, only 3 species had ever won their freedom. The selection process was simple and terrible. They divided Earth into zones, and each zone held a lottery. The lottery chose a village, and that village had to provide a volunteer. If no one volunteered, they would choose for them. This village was small, nestled in the green mountains of Korea. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where old women sat outside their homes and watched children play in the streets. It was the last place anyone expected to be chosen. But the lottery did not care about expectations. When the news came, his mother collapsed. Her younger brother, only 15 years old, stood frozen in the doorway of their small house. The village elder, a man named, read the announcement 3 times because no one could believe it. They had 1 week to provide a volunteer. For 6 days, the village argued. Some said they should offer one of the old farmers who was already dying. Others said they should draw lots among the young men. A few whispered that perhaps no one should volunteer at all, let the choose and take the blame away from human hands. Did not argue, he did not speak at all, but on the 6th night found him sitting behind their house, staring at the stars with wet eyes. "I should go," he said quietly. "I am young, I am healthy, maybe I could." "You are 15, said. She sat down beside him on the cold ground. "You have not even finished growing." "Neither have you." He tried to smile but failed. "You are only 19. You were supposed to become a teacher. You were supposed to have a life." Looked at the stars. Somewhere up there the ships waited in orbit. Somewhere up there the arena floated in the darkness, hungry for blood. "I have read about the arena," she said slowly. "I have studied the broadcasts, the old recordings. The champions who win are not always the strongest." Shook his head. "The champions who win are warriors, soldiers, monsters. You are a history student, you read books and write essays. What could you possibly do against creatures that can lift trucks and breathe fire?" Did not answer. She simply put her arm around her brother and held him until he stopped crying. The next morning, she walked to the village center and spoke her name. The transport arrived within hours. Commander himself came to inspect the volunteer, a massive reptilian creature covered in shimmering green scales. He was taller than any human, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like hot coals. He circled slowly, his tongue flicking out to taste the air around her. "This is your champion." His voice was deep, rumbling like an earthquake. "This small thing." The village elder bowed his head. She volunteered according to the laws. Laughed. The sound was terrible, wet and harsh. "Laws, yes. The laws say you may send whoever you wish to die." He bent down until his face was close to his. His breath smelled like metal and smoke. "Do you understand what waits for you, small one? Do you understand that you will face warriors who have trained since birth, that you will face species who evolved to kill?" Met his eyes. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs, but she did not look away. "I understand," she said. straightened and made a sound that might have been a sigh. Brave, stupid but brave. Perhaps you will provide entertainment before you die. He waved one of his 4 hands toward the transport. Come, the arena waits for no one. Turned to look at her village one last time. Her mother stood at the edge of the crowd, held up by 2 neighbors because her legs would not support her. Stood beside her, his hands clenched into fists, his face twisted with grief and guilt and 100 other emotions he was too young to carry. Pulled the jade pendant from around her neck, the one her grandmother had given her, the one she had worn every day since she was a child, and pressed it into her mother's hands. Keep this for me, she said. I will come back for it. She did not say goodbye. Goodbye was too final, too heavy. Instead, she simply turned and walked toward the transport, her steps steady and sure. The other species in the holding area looked at her with a mixture of emotions. The tall creatures with clicking mandibles and too many legs watched her with something like curiosity. The massive beings made of living stone barely noticed her at all. The quick and agile with 4 arms and golden skin laughed and pointed. Only one creature approached her, older than the others with a cracked shell and faded colors. Its name was, and it would be her handler for the preparation period. You are the human, said. Its voice was like dry leaves rustling in wind. I expected someone, larger. Everyone does, said. Studied her for a long moment. You will die quickly in the arena. The other champions will not even consider you a threat. They will crush you like an afterthought. Nodded slowly. Good. The old tilted its head, confused. Good, you wish to die. No, looked around the holding area, watching the other champions, studying their movements, their habits, their weaknesses. I wish to be underestimated. For the first time in perhaps 100 years, felt something strange in its old chest, something it had almost forgotten. Hope, the training compound, was a city floating in space. It held everything a champion might need: weapons halls, combat arenas, medical bays, and living quarters for each species. They had built it thousands of years ago, and it had seen countless warriors prepare for glory or death. Its quarters were small but comfortable. They were not cruel to their tributes. They wanted healthy champions, not broken prisoners. She had a bed, a bathroom, and a window that looked out at the endless stars. She also had access to the compound's library, which contained records of every arena battle ever fought. She spent her first 3 days reading. The other champions thought she was afraid. They saw the small human girl hiding in her room, and they assumed she was crying or praying or doing whatever weak creatures did before they died. They did not realize she was studying them. The champion was named Thrum. He was 12 feet tall and made of living granite. His skin could stop plasma blasts, his fists could shatter steel, and he had won 6 gladiatorial matches on his. He was slow, but that had never mattered because nothing could hurt him anyway. The champion was named Kali's. She was fast and graceful, with 4 arms that could each hold a different weapon. She had been trained since childhood in the art of combat, and she moved like water flowing downhill. But notice something in the old recordings. When Kali's was cornered, when she could not run or dodge, her movements became jerky and desperate. The champion was named. He was Commander's nephew, the latest in a long line of arena victors. He carried a plasma spear that had been passed down through 12 generations, and he fought with the confidence of someone who had never truly been challenged. There were 4 other champions from lesser species. Studied them too, but she knew they would not last long. The arena always came down to the strongest, and these 4 were not strong enough. On the 4th day, left her quarters and began to run. She ran laps around the training compound. She ran until her legs burned and her lungs screamed for air. She ran until the other champions stopped and stared, confused by this strange behavior. What is she doing? Kali's asked, watching from the weapons hall. Thrum rumbled a laugh. Perhaps she hopes to run away from death. Said nothing. He simply watched the small human girl with his glowing eyes, a slight frown on his scaled face. Ran for 2 hours. Then she stretched for another hour, bending her body in ways that made the rigid aliens uncomfortable. Then she meditated, sitting completely still in the middle of the running track while champions walked past and mocked her. The galactic feeds broadcast everything. Commentators laughed at the human champion. Betting pools opened, and the odds against were so high that they broke the normal scales. On Earth, people watched in despair as their champion did nothing but run and stretch and sit. But watching from her small house in the mountains noticed something. Her daughter's eyes were not closed during meditation. They were open, watching, always watching. Notice, too, the old found after her meditation, when she was eating the bland nutrient paste that served as food for human tributes, sat across from her, its many legs folding beneath its body. "You are not what you appear to be," said. Swallowed her food. "Neither are you. You were a warrior once. I can see it in how you move, how you watch the other handlers. You fight against old instincts every day." Was silent for a long moment. "I was a champion 60 years ago. I fought in the arena and lost. They let me live because I provided good entertainment. Now I serve as a handler, preparing others for the death I escaped." "Why do you help me?" asked. "I am human. I am nothing to you." "Because you remind me of someone," said softly. "Myself, before I forgot what hope looked like." Set down her spoon. "I need your help." "I know, and I should refuse. Helping you would violate 100 rules and risk my position here." Leaned forward, its cracked shell catching the light. "What do you need?" "Tell me about the burning fields." Went very still. The burning fields were the third stage of the arena, a vast plain where jets of flame erupted from the ground in seemingly random patterns. No champion ever used the burning fields strategically. They simply avoided them, fighting around the edges while the fire raged in the center. "Why?" asked. "Because no one expects anyone to go there, because everyone avoids it, because the flames are not random." Met the old warrior's eyes. "I have watched 50 recordings of the burning fields. The pattern repeats every 4 minutes and 32 seconds. It is complex, but it is predictable." Stared at her. You memorized the pattern." "I have a good memory. My professors always said it was my only real talent," smiled slightly. "But memorizing the pattern is not enough. I need to survive the flames long enough to move through them. The gaps between eruptions are small, sometimes only 2 or 3 seconds. Impossible. Even with the pattern, no living creature could." "Exoskeleton oil," said. "I read about it in the library. It provides temporary heat resistance. Not much, perhaps 3 seconds per exposure, but 3 seconds is enough if you know exactly where to step." Sat back, overwhelmed. "You have been planning this since you arrived." "I have been planning this since I read my first arena recording." Pushed her food aside. "Will you help me? Will you help me synthesize the oil?" The old thought about the rules, about the punishment for interfering with a tribute, about the safe, quiet life it had built over 60 years of service. Then it thought about hope. "Yes," said, "I will help you." For the next 2 weeks, they worked in secret, smuggled materials from the medical bay while continued her public routine of running and stretching and meditation. The other champions continued to mock her. The galactic feeds continued to broadcast her as a joke. Back on Earth, organized protests demanding better representation. He gave speeches about human dignity and the unfairness of the selection process. He did not know that his sister was spending her nights mixing chemicals in a hidden corner of the compound, preparing for something no champion had ever attempted. On the final night before the arena, stood in her quarters and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, her mother was clutching a jade pendant and praying. Somewhere out there, her brother was shouting at the sky and demanding justice. She would not let them down. She touched the window with her fingertips, feeling the cold of space beyond the glass. Tomorrow, she whispered, the arena will learn what humans really are. Arena of Proving was beautiful in a terrible way. It floated in the darkness between worlds, a massive structure of ancient metal and glowing energy fields. 40,000 spectators filled its stands, creatures from across the Dominion who had traveled for months just to watch champions die. Billions more watched through screens and neural links, their attention focused on the greatest show in the galaxy. Walked through the entrance tunnel with the other champions. The roar of the crowd washed over her like a wave, so loud it vibrated in her chest. Lights flashed and music played, and announcers called out names in languages she did not understand. When her name was announced, the crowd laughed. Not all of them. In one small section of the stands, Earth's delegation sat in terrified silence. There were only 50 of them, diplomats and observers who had been allowed to attend. They watched their champion walk into the arena, and they prayed to whatever gods might be listening. The 7 champions stood in a line while the rules were explained. 5 stages. Survive each stage or be eliminated. The last species standing would earn their freedom. The rest would remain conquered. Looked at her opponents. Thrum stood like a mountain of stone, utterly confident in his invincibility. Kali's stretched her 4 arms, eager to begin. They held his plasma spear with casual grace, its blade humming with deadly energy. The 4 lesser champions tried to look brave, but fear flickered in their eyes. None of them looked at. She was not worth looking at. The first stage was called the Maze of Blades. When the starting signal sounded, the champions were dropped into a massive labyrinth. The walls were made of spinning blades, shifting and rearranging every few minutes. The goal was simple: reach the center platform while avoiding death. Any champion who could not reach the center in 30 minutes would be eliminated. Thrum charged forward immediately, trusting his stone skin to protect him from the blades. Kali's moved like a shadow, her 4 arms helping her climb and swing through gaps in the spinning metal. Walked with purpose, using his plasma spear to melt through obstacles. Stood still. She closed her eyes and listened. The maze was loud, metal grinding against metal, blades whistling through air, champions shouting and fighting. But underneath all that noise was a rhythm. The machines had a pattern just like everything else. For 5 minutes she did nothing but listen. The galactic feeds showed her standing motionless while the other champions advanced. Commentators wondered if she had frozen in fear. Back on Earth, millions of viewers covered their eyes, unable to watch. Then opened her eyes and began to move. She did not run. She walked, calm and steady, through the maze. When blades spun toward her, she stepped aside at the last moment. When walls shifted, she was already moving in the right direction. She never stopped, never hesitated, never made a wrong turn. The crowd slowly fell quiet as they watched. Thrum reached the center first, his stone body covered in scratches but unharmed. Kali's arrived second, bleeding from a dozen small cuts. Came third, his scales slightly singed from using his spear too close to his own body. Then walked out of the maze, completely untouched, and stepped onto the platform. 2 of the lesser champions had been killed by the blades. 2 more arrived wounded and exhausted. 5 remained. Stared at the human girl for a long moment. For the first time, something other than contempt flickered in his eyes. The second stage was called the Pit. It was exactly what it sounded like: a featureless arena with no obstacles, no cover, no escape. Champions were placed inside and had to fight until only 3 remained. The rules allowed any tactics, including surrender. When the stage began, the 4 remaining champions immediately formed an alliance against the 2 weakest tributes. Within minutes, the lesser species were eliminated, 1 killed, 1 forced to surrender. Now it was down to Thrum, Kali's end. They turned to look at her. Ran. The crowd booed. They had expected combat, bravery, a final stand. Instead, the human girl fled like a frightened animal, dodging between the larger champions and refusing to engage. "Stand and fight," Thrum roared, his stone fists crashing into the ground where had been a moment before. But did not fight. She ran and hid and dodged, using her small size to stay beneath the notice of creatures who were focused on each other. Collies made her move while Thrum was distracted. She lunged at with all four arms, her blade seeking the gaps in his stone armor. It was a mistake. Thrum was slow, but he was not helpless. One massive fist caught Collies in the chest and sent her flying across the pit. Finished her before she could recover. His plasma spear pierced her throat, and the champion died with a look of surprise on her golden face. Now 3 remained. Thrum turned toward, ready to crush her like an insect, but was tired. He had been fighting and chasing for nearly an hour, and even his incredible endurance had limits. His movements were slower now, his breath heavier. Kept running. She ran until the timer for the stage reached 0, and the announcer declared that 3 champions had survived. Commander stood in his observation box, his scales flushed with anger. "This is not combat," he roared. "This is cowardice. She has not thrown a single blow." But cowardice was not against the rules. Survival was survival, no matter how it was achieved. In the stands, Earth's delegation allowed themselves a moment of hope. Their champion was still alive, wounded, tired, and mocked by the galaxy, but alive. Stood at the edge of the pit, catching her breath. Her legs ached and her lungs burned, but she was smiling slightly. 2 more stages, 2 more opponents. And the burning fields were next. The burning fields stretched across the arena like a sea of waiting death. Metal grates covered the floor, and beneath them, fuel pipes twisted and coiled like the veins of some massive beast. Every few seconds, jets of blue-white fire erupted from the grates, hot enough to melt steel, hot enough to burn even the toughest alien skin. For 10,000 years, champions had avoided the burning fields. They fought around the edges, using the flames as a barrier rather than a weapon. No one was foolish enough to enter the fire. Until today. The 3 remaining champions stood at the entrance to the stage. Thrum seemed uncomfortable for the first time. His stone skin could withstand many things, but not direct flame. They held his plasma spear loosely, his eyes scanning the field with the confidence of someone who had studied every arena recording. Stood between them, small and silent, her hands empty. The starting signal sounded. Moved first. He did not waste time on the Thrum was too slow to catch him, and there was an easier target. His plasma spear hummed as he charged toward the human girl, the blade leaving a trail of heat in the air. Did not move. The crowd held its breath. Earth's delegation closed their eyes. This was the end, they thought. This was where their champion died. Spear thrust forward, aimed its heart. She stepped aside. The movement was small, almost casual, but it was enough. The blade passed through empty air, and its momentum carried him past her. He spun around, surprised, and struck again. Again, stepped aside. Again, the blade missed. For 30 seconds they danced like this, attacking, dodging by inches. The crowd began to murmur. This was not the behavior of a frightened animal. This was something else. "Stop running," hissed. "Stand and face death with honor." Said nothing. She simply kept moving, her eyes watching not but the floor beneath their feet. Behind them, Thrum had made his decision. He charged toward both of them, his massive stone fists raised to crush whoever got in his way. The ground shook with each step. Saw an opportunity. If Thrum was focused on the human, he could attack from behind. The stone armor was tough, but the plasma spear could find the gaps. He turned away from just for a moment. It was enough. Ran not away from the champions, but toward the burning fields. She sprinted past the edge of the safe zone, and onto the grated floor where fire waited to consume her. The crowd gasped. Commander leaned forward in his observation box, his glowing eyes wide with disbelief. "She has lost her mind," Collies' handler said to no one in particular. The heat will kill her in seconds. But did not burn. She moved through the fields like water flowing through stone. When fire erupted on her left, she was already stepping right. When flames burst from the ground ahead, she was spinning past them. Her body twisted and turned in patterns that seemed impossible, finding gaps in the inferno that lasted only heartbeats. The exoskeleton oil that had helped her synthesize coated her skin beneath her clothes. It bought her 3 seconds of protection each time fire touched her, and 3 seconds was all she needed when you knew exactly where every flame would appear. Thrum stopped at the edge of the fields. He was not stupid enough to follow. Fire was the one thing that could hurt him, truly hurt him, and the human girl was clearly trying to lure him to his death. But was not Thrum. He was the nephew of Commander, the latest in 12 generations of arena champions. His honor would not allow him to stand and watch while a human, a pathetic, weak, insignificant human, walked through flames that he was afraid to enter. This is a trick, he told himself. She is using some technology, some cheat. She cannot truly survive the fire. He gripped his plasma spear and stepped onto the burning ground. The first jet of flame erupted 3 feet to his left. He dodged it easily. The second came from behind, and he felt the heat singe the tip of his tail as he leaped forward. The third caught him in the side. Screamed. His ceremonial armor, designed for combat rather than flame, began to melt against his scales. He stumbled, slashing wildly with his spear, trying to find a path through the inferno. But he did not know the pattern. Stopped moving. She stood in the center of the burning fields, flames erupting all around her but never quite touching her, and she watched burn. "You should have studied the fields," she said. Her voice was calm, almost sad. "You should have seen the pattern." Fell to his knees. His plasma spear slipped from his burning hands, its shaft cracking from the heat, its plasma cell rupturing with a small explosion. The weapon of 12 generations, the symbol of dominance, died in the flames beside its wielder. Hao gasped. His scales were blackened, his eyes dim with pain. "How did you?" "I watched," said simply. "I studied. I prepared." She stepped closer, moving through a gap in the flames that closed behind her. "Your people conquered my world because you were stronger, faster, more advanced. You did not think you needed to learn anything about us. You did not think we were worth understanding." Another jet of fire erupted and screamed again as it caught his leg. He tried to crawl toward the edge of the fields, but his body was failing. The heat was too much, even for scales. "Surrender," said. "End this stage and save your life." Looked at her with hate-filled eyes. "Never. I will not surrender to a human." Nodded slowly. "Then you will die." She turned and walked away, leaving burning in the center of the fields. The path she took was precise, each step perfectly timed, each movement flowing into the next. The flames roared around her but never touched her. When she reached the edge of the burning fields, she looked back. Was not moving anymore. The crowd was silent. 40,000 aliens sat in stunned disbelief, watching the small human girl emerge from an inferno that had killed a champion. Billions more watched through screens across the galaxy, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Thrum stared at with something new in his ancient stone eyes: fear. "What are you?" he rumbled. Bent down and picked up his broken plasma spear. The shaft was cracked, the blade dead, but she held it like a trophy. "I am human," she said. And for the first time in the history of the arena, a champion ran away. Thrum ran, but he could not run forever. The arena was designed to prevent escape. As the champion fled from the burning fields, walls rose from the ground to block his path. Barriers of energy crackled to life, herding him back toward the center stage where the final confrontation would take place. Followed slowly, still carrying his broken spear. Her skin was blistered beneath her clothes, red and raw where the oil had worn away. Her hair was singed, and every step sent waves of pain through her exhausted body. But she walked. The crowd watched in complete silence. They had come expecting entertainment, expecting to see primitive species crushed by might. Instead, they had watched a human girl walk through fire while their champion burned. Commander stood in his observation box, his scales pale with shock. His nephew was dead. The plasma spear of 12 generations was destroyed. Everything he had believed about humanity, about all conquered species, was crumbling before his eyes. "This is wrong," he whispered. "This cannot be happening." But it was happening, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The final stage had no name. It was simply the end, an open platform where the last champions faced each other until only one remained. Thrum stood at the center, his stone body trembling slightly. He had never felt fear before, not in all his centuries of life. He did not like it. Stepped onto the platform. She was so small compared to He was 12 feet tall, made of living granite with fists that could crush mountains. She was barely 5 feet, made of soft flesh and fragile bone, holding a broken spear that could no longer fire. It should not have been a contest. But Thrum had seen what she could do. He had watched her walk through flames that would have destroyed even his stone skin. He had seen her dodge attacks without seeming to try, moving through danger like water through cracks in rock. "Surrender," said. Her voice was tired but steady. "Your champion is dead. Your planet cannot afford to lose you as well." Thrum's stone face twisted. "Do not surrender. We are the mountain. We do not break." "Then you will fall," raised the broken spear. "Like the mountain you will crumble, not today perhaps, but eventually. Everything falls eventually." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Thrum charged. The ground shook with each of his steps. His massive fist swung toward with enough force to shatter starships. The crowd finally found their voice, roaring with anticipation as they closed the distance. "Did not run." She stepped forward, directly into his path, and thrust the broken spear into the gap between two of his stone plates. The spear was dead. It could not fire plasma anymore, but its tip was still sharp, still made of metal harder than diamond, and had spent 2 weeks studying anatomy in the arena library. The gap she struck was small, barely wide enough to fit a finger, but it was enough. Thrum screamed as the spear pierced something vital inside his stone body. His charge faltered, his fists missing by inches as he stumbled past her. He tried to turn, tried to swing again, but his movements were wrong now. Something inside him was broken. "How?" he gasped, clutching at the spear embedded in his chest. "How did you know?" "I read about your species," said simply. "I read about the Great War 3,000 years ago when your people fought among themselves. I read about the assassin who killed a general using nothing but a needle in exactly the right place." She met his eyes. "You think we are weak because we are small, but small creatures learn to find weaknesses. We have to. It is how we survive." Thrum sank to his knees. The light was fading from his eyes, not dying, not yet, but surrendering to the pain that even his ancient body could not ignore. "I yield," he said. The words seemed to cost him more than the wound. "The human wins." The arena was silent. For a moment nothing moved. No one spoke. 40,000 aliens sat frozen in their seats, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Billions more stared at their screens, waiting for someone to tell them this was a mistake, a dream, a malfunction. Then the arena's ancient AI spoke. "Victory," it announced. Its voice echoed through the stadium, reverberating across the galaxy. "By the laws set forth in the First Accord, humanity has proven itself. Earth shall be recognized as an equal member of the Dominion." The silence shattered. Earth's delegation erupted in screams of joy. They hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. They shouted its name until their throats were raw. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. People poured into the streets, dancing and crying and embracing strangers. In's village fell to her knees, clutching the jade pendant and weeping with relief. Stood beside her, his face wet with tears, watching the broadcast repeat the final moment over and over again. In the arena, walked slowly toward Commander's observation box. The broken spear dragged behind her, leaving a trail of Thrum's stone blood on the floor. Her body was failing. The burns, the exhaustion, the 2 weeks of minimal sleep were finally catching up. But she made it to the edge of the platform, looked up at the commander, and dropped the spear at his feet. "We do not conquer," she said. Her voice was quiet, but every microphone in the arena caught it. Every broadcast carried it across the galaxy. "We do not enslave. We do not build empires on the bones of weaker species." Stared down at her, his glowing eyes filled with emotions he could not name. "What are you then?" he asked. "If not conquerors, not warriors, not predators, what are you?" Smiled slightly. It hurt to smile, everything hurt, but she did it anyway. "We are survivors," she said. "We are the species that looks at impossible odds and finds a way. We are the species that learns and adapts and refuses to give up." She gestured at the broken spear, at the defeated champions, at the silent crowd. "Your people saw us and thought we were prey, easy targets, creatures too weak to matter." She straightened, standing as tall as her small body would allow. "You were wrong." The words hung in the air for a long moment. Then slowly, one of the alien spectators began to applaud. Then another. Then another. The sound spread through the arena like a wave, growing louder and louder until it thundered against the walls. They were not applauding because they loved humanity. Many of them still hated humans, still considered them primitive and weak. But they understood what had happened today. They understood that something had changed. Humanity was no longer conquered. Was taken to the medical bay, where doctors treated her burns with technology far beyond anything on Earth. Came to visit her, the old cracked shell trembling with emotion. "You did it," said. "You actually did it." Lay on the medical table, her body wrapped in healing gel. "We did it," she corrected. "I could not have one without your help." "My help was small, a bit of oil, a bit of knowledge," touched her hand gently. "The victory was yours, the courage was yours, the hope was yours." Closed her eyes. She was so tired. But for the first time in 2 years, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Now everything changes. The Dominion will never look at conquered species the same way again. The arena will never be the same. And your people," the old paused, "your people will never forget what you did here today." Months later, returned to Earth. She finished her history degree and became a teacher, just as she had always planned. She never fought again. She did not need to. The arena of proving was abolished within a decade. The Dominion could not justify it anymore, not after a human girl had proven how flawed the entire system was. And somewhere in the archives of the Dominion, this broken plasma spear sits in a case of honor, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of the day they learned what humanity truly was. Not warriors, not conquerors, not predators. Survivors. And that, in the end, was far more dangerous.